get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another XMPro webinar. Today we are going to go through XMPro and bringing iBPMS to SharePoint. XMPro brings iBoss, which is an intelligent business operations suite, which we see as a convergence of business process management and BI. If you require any more information on this, contact us after this webinar. Our sales team or our partners will be more than happy to provide you with more details on that. So what do? We bring the next generation business process management, which Gartner calls iBPMS, to SharePoint, which I'm going to take you through today. So what are we going to cover today? We've got three objectives we're going to go into. The first one is intelligent processes within SharePoint. What do we mean by intelligent processes? Follow this up with some examples as well. How to upload a document into a SharePoint document library. And the last one is using a SharePoint list as a data source. So, intelligent processes in SharePoint. The benefits of what we bring to the table of bringing intelligent processes into SharePoint. We've highlighted the three big ones that we've found. The first one is there is no coding. You do not need to open Visual Studio or any coding platform to deploy these processes into SharePoint. A SharePoint consultant or a business analyst can configure these. They can configure the processes, they can configure the web parts, they can configure the data lists that make up the lookups that you're actually going to be using within your processes themselves. And the last one is the same process information is available within SharePoint, within Outlook, within the web, depending on your platform of choice for your end users. So you're not confined to just your SharePoint environment. You've got the exact same process information, so you define it once. It's available on multiple interfaces for your users to work through. We're going to work through an example of XMPro in SharePoint, and we're going to touch on a few items. The first one is the standard web parts, a task list, the process form, how we render it in SharePoint, what it looks like, what components are available in it, and lastly, how to configure these web parts within SharePoint. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint there. I'm just going to bring across the web interface. This is not SharePoint for those of you that are familiar with SharePoint. This is our web interface. What I'm actually going to do from our web interface is create a new requisition, and with this requisition we're actually going to process it, push it through to the next step, and then we're going to access that from within SharePoint itself. So the first step we're going to do in XMPro's web front end. The second step from that point onwards is going to be from within SharePoint itself. So we're just going to keep it very basic. Stock requisition within the IT category. We just need to procure a new server rack for cloud backbone infrastructure. Let's attach a sample quote, the stock code, a description, the price, we're requiring 1, and we are going to submit that document. So what we're actually done here is, if I switch to the SharePoint interface, is triggered it from the XMPro screen and pushed that information through into SharePoint itself. What you're looking at here, for those of you familiar with SharePoint, is the SharePoint 2010 installation. This will be your portal login from your corporate environment. We've kept it very basic to what you're looking at here. What we've done is, if I open an XMPro for SharePoint down the bottom, it will load a basic web part page, and on that web part page waiting for your screens to catch up there. And on the web part page, you will see two web parts. You got web parts on the left and you have a web part on the right. We've got a task list that we've populated on the left. If I stop here for a minute and we go back into the XM web interface, if I open up his to-do task list and I open up the broadcasting, you'll see we have capture Mad Tuesday brief, capture a promotional brief, and capture a Wacky Wednesday brief as well. If we move over to the SharePoint web parts, I draw your attention to the top. We have capture a promotion brief, a Mad Tuesday brief, and a Wacky Wednesday brief. So what we've actually got there, let's go back there. What we've actually got there is a single data set of information. You're looking at the exact same process task list, which is available in our web interface and is available in our SharePoint interface. If I open up any one of the tasks themselves, you'll see the exact same task available in both interfaces as well. So what we've got is, it looks like a very busy screen. I'll walk you through what we're actually looking at on the screen here. So to keep it simple, we've got two web parts on the screen. You've got a web part zone on the left and we've got a web part zone on the right. If I move my mouse over the top, you'll see you've got your basic SharePoint web part functionality. This is SharePoint's own functionality with regards to a web part. I can edit these web parts and move them around. If I edit this web part, you'll see I'm looking at a web part page with the various zones, and I can drag the web parts in as I'm looking at them. What you're looking at is one configuration option we have for web parts. There are multiple configuration options depending on your needs and requirements within an organization. Some organizations are quite happy with how they're looking at it here. You can configure the amount of columns you're looking at. So if I scroll to the right, what you're looking at there is the top half of that is SharePoint's configuration options for a basic web part. What we've actually done is at the bottom we've introduced XMPro specific items to that web part as well. So we've extended the web part itself. If I go into the columns, you'll see at the moment I've got due, number, and from ticked. So I can configure all of them on. I can configure all of them off depending on my needs and my requirements. If I expand the list properties, I can allow sorting, I can allow paging, I can allow grouping. So whatever your needs and requirements are for lists within SharePoint, process lists, task lists, you can configure the web parts. You can have multiple web parts as well. You don't have to just have the two web parts we've got on the screen. You can have multiple on the screen, each serving a different purpose. If I cancel that, just wait for the SharePoint environment to cancel the web part editing, and we come back to the form that we're looking at. So what we're looking at here is we've got a list of tasks for a specific user down the left. As soon as he clicks on a specific task, it's going to open up the task definition we've configured on the right. In this instance, it's a purchase requisition. We've got an approver name, his approval limit, requisition total, and we have a budget goal in the middle, indicating his current budget, his actual, his committed to, and his requested. We bring through the details down the bottom from the person requesting, and the current user can put comments in. We can view the current process flow diagram at the top as well. So what we're looking at here is a budget graph within an approval form. What we've got along the right there are the various routing options. As this category is for IT, you'll see we have a tech approval along the right. If I picked a category from the previous step as maintenance, I will get a maintenance approval. Or if I picked it for finance, I'll get a finance approval. So you have dynamic routing options which appear on the right, which are context aware. They're aware of the information that's captured on the screen, and they adapt themselves accordingly. What we're going to do here is, this is our design environment, what we call the XM Designer. This is where we configure the processes once to deploy them to the multiple platforms. If I double click the first approval, this is the same approval screen that we've just looked at with the graph in the middle, the budget graph asking for approval for specific spend to a specific category. If I drag the chart in and we just go set up some properties, I'll just get rid of his caption. Let's open up the chart. So what we've opened up here is what we call our chart wizard, which allows us to build our in-flight analytics into processes. I'm going to leave it as a bar chart. You've got appearance options. You can change its colors. You can change its styling options. So everything doesn't have to be the XMPro colors or orange all across the board. It can handle multiple series as well. I'm going to call this month. And there's various other options down the bottom here. You've got full control over how your charts get configured with regards to where are their point labels, where are their chart titles. If we go into diagram, because I've picked a bar chart, I'd actually like this chart to be rotated. It's going to make a lot more sense to me rotated versus horizontal. I've got control over axis. I want to give the chart a title as well. So let's call this spend to date. And I can click finish. If I go back to our SharePoint form and we refresh that form itself, what you'll see right at the bottom, as it was the last control I've added onto the form, we'll have a second chart that's going to appear, pulling information. Now, this chart can pull its information from multitudes of sources. It can pull it from a SAP system. It can pull it from an Oracle system. It can pull it from a flat file system. It can pull it from a modern mainframe system. It can pull it from a legacy mainframe system. So if I scroll down, you'll see I have my current spend to date. Now, it's good having the two graphs. I'd like to move this chart up so that it actually makes a lot more sense above my budget goal. If I go back into the workspace itself, I'm just going to change the index for the chart. Once again, if we refresh that form, you'll see we have spend to date, which is now appearing above budget goal. So very quickly, you can start creating in-flight analytics and have it pushed through into a SharePoint front end. We dragged the chart on, linked it to an existing data set, configured the various options on it, and surfaced it for the actual approval user to have a look at. If I bring us back to the PowerPoint, so what we've just gone through is an example of XMPro and SharePoint. So we've looked at a standard web part. We saw an example with two web parts, one on the left, one on the right, the one on the left being a task list, the one on the right being the actual form render web part. So task list is exactly the same task list as any other XMPro interface. It's the exact same task list you look at if you log into the web, if you log into Outlook. The process form. We had a look at how the form is rendered. We had a look at the information that was being pulled through from that form. We added an extra chart onto the form, linked it to an existing data set, which brought a lot more information to the user, context information to the user. And then lastly, we looked at how to configure. So how to configure a web part firstly, exactly the same as you would configure any other web part in SharePoint. It's got the same SharePoint web part options. We've just extended them and added a few extra at the bottom to control how the lists display their information and how the form displays its information. We also looked at how to configure our in-flight analytics by creating a basic chart, linking it to an existing data set, and move the chart around on the actual form. What we're going to look at next is intelligence which is not found in SharePoint. The first one we're going to cover is what we call process goals. Second one we're going to cover is social process discussions. The third one is next best actions. And finally, the last one, case files. So we're going to take each of these and have a look at how is this intelligence, which is not currently in SharePoint, brought to SharePoint with XMPro's iBoss offering. If I stop the PowerPoint there, and let's come back to the XMPro screen, once again, it's exactly the same screen we've just looked at. We've got the chart. I'm going to leave the chart on there for the rest of this webinar. We've got the list on the left, standard web parts for both of them. What we're going to look at with regards to the intelligence we bring to the table is across the top. So the first one we've got is process goals. A process goals allows you to visualize at each work step to help guide your business decisions. You configure these per process, and what it's doing is it's providing more information, contextual information, to the person who needs to make the approval decisions. So in this example, we're working with a purchase requisition. So we have the current budget versus actual. We have our current budget and the spend for the last year across the top. If I scroll right, we have our actual spend per department. And we can have a look at IT is quite a bit more than the finance and HR combined. That gives me more information to help make my decision. If I close the process goals, if I open up the history, what the history is showing is the entire audit trail for the process. So every single step that we do is auditable. Every step that we capture goes into a time and date stamp attached to a user itself. If I scroll down, what you'll see there is we've got two icons. The first icon indicates to me that it was a specific task. So task 1 was to create a new requisition. What the second icon tells me is a discussion was actually created linked to that task. This brings us back to, if I just jump to the PowerPoint once again, this brings us back to social process discussions. Social discussions around a process. Now this can be a specific transaction, or this can be globally at process level. I'm not happy with the procurement process, it's taking too long. Or I'm not happy with the step in the procurement process, it's asking for too much information I don't have available at the time. In the current example, we actually have a process discussion which is attached to a transaction. You can drill all the way down into that, and it will bring the information back specific to that transaction itself. So if I scroll a bit further down, what are the specifications we are looking for the server, or looking at for the server? So very quickly, you can start getting a social collaboration around a specific transaction if there is more information that you need from a specific individual. It also allows you to start working out the social influences in a process. You may have a process which spans across your organization. It goes through 5 levels of approval, but actually it's going through 8 levels of approval. 2 other levels or 3 other levels are going through email, a phone call, an instant message, or some other mechanism which has not been captured. If we go to the discuss at the top, what we've got here, this is where we actually capture the discussions and link them to a specific task, or link them to a global holistic level of a process. So I can pick a procurement purchase requisition and I can capture a message. I think this process is taking too long, there are too many steps in it. Or if it's a customer onboarding process, I think we need to revamp, take it from a structured process to unstructured. I cannot get to the steps in time even though I know more information about the user itself. I can discuss it with a particular user, or I can leave it open to everyone that's got access to that actual process itself. And lastly, next best. What next best does is it has a look at predictive as well as history and works out what is the next step you should take. It's not going to force you to take the step, it's just offering up the options for you to take the step. So we've got process goals, which are giving you more information with regards to your KPIs. So how are you tracking budget versus actual? How are you tracking per department? Next best action is saying, for this given process, we've had 145 approvals, we've had 38 technical approvals, and we've had 17 declines. It's not going to force you to approve it. It's not going to force you to do a technical approval. What it's going to do is provide you more information so that you can better make a decision on where this task is actually going to be going. So if we close that again, if I bring this back to SharePoint again, and let's take it from the top. So intelligence not found in SharePoint. Process goals. KPIs you define at a process level which provide context information to the user. Second, social process discussions. Discussions around a specific transaction or discussions around a specific process, process improvement, process enhancement. Next best action. What is the predictive nature of this process? Where is it going if I pick a specific path? Once again, the system's not forcing you to take that path. It's offering up an option for you to have a look at to better make your decision. And lastly, case files, which I'll go back to and illustrate now. So what the 4 of those are trying to help is the person who needs to make a decision to give him more information, more contextual information, so that he can better make the decision that he needs to. If we go back to this example, if this process didn't have a budget goal graph in here, or did not have a spend to date graph in here, the person who doing the approval would have his limit, his requisition total, and a comment. Typically what would happen is you would work out, do I have budget for this? Have I exceeded my budget? Go and work it out. Open up Excel, have a look at your graphs in Excel. What we've done is we've taken all of that and made that part of the actual process. So we've got the in-flight analytics. Once again, you can hook that up to any data source. If it's a SAP backend, you can hook it up to SAP. If you're looking at an Oracle, if you're looking at a SQL, if you're looking at a flat file, whatever your data source is can be sucked in and actually rendered as a specific in-flight analytics within the process itself. We touched on process goals across the top. Once again, your KPIs defined at process level. We had a look at the history. History using the transaction as well as the discussion, both forming part of the audit trail. So you can, for the first time, track a transaction from end to end, as well as the social interactions that happened within that process. You can put your analytics on top of that as well and start working out who are the social influences within your organization. Why is a purchase requisition always going to person X for approval or for a comment or for a recommendation? Should he not be made part of the process? Is there knowledge transfer which needs to happen? Your business process needs to evolve to incorporate the social discussion aspects of that. And then the last one we touched on was the next best action itself, the predictive analytical nature. Where should this go based on the past history of this actual process itself? And then the last one is case files themselves. What case files does here is any document which has been attached as part of the process. It puts it into a central location as part of the process for you to actually view. This was the process I submitted previously. We had the quote. What the icon on the right there tells us is to what system was this uploaded. It was uploaded into SharePoint. It can be uploaded into whatever document repository you have. It does not have to be SharePoint. In this instance, it is SharePoint. We can upload documents into a flat file system and link it into part of the process as well. So intelligence not found in SharePoint. The second area we wanted to touch on was how to upload a document into SharePoint. First of all, the benefits of doing that from within a process environment is you can apply your version management. You can apply your metadata to the documents. So if you have specific documentation which needs to be uploaded, if you've got a policy documentation or a contract which has specific metadata attached to a contract, you'd want to push that through into SharePoint as well. SharePoint handles the indexing of that, which means the searching and bringing out of that information is very quick. All process-related documents get properly stored and indexed. So once again, you're using the power of SharePoint to properly index and store and allow you to pull that information out from within SharePoint. If I flick back to the actual SharePoint, now when we started this process, we started it from the XMPro front end. We captured a requisition. We attached a quote. Where that quote got uploaded to was, if I go to the root of the SharePoint site, if you have a look down the left, we have libraries. I created a file uploads library, kept it very open, and we have a quote which was attached in here. You can upload documentation into the system simply. So you can have one folder where all your documents get uploaded into SharePoint, or you can have multiple folders within a specific location. So if you are looking at policies and your policies are related to a client, you could have a client folder, upload your various policy documents into those specific folders, and SharePoint handles the document retrieval and indexing of those documents themselves. If I go back to the home page, so once again, the benefits of uploading a document into SharePoint: version management, very important. You can have multiple versions of a document. It will also store the changes on those documents as well, so you can see who checked something out, who made a change, and revert the change back to a previous version if there was something wrong with the new version of the document. Metadata, very important for indexing retrieval purposes. And then once again, all your process-related documents get properly stored and indexed for easy retrieval. And lastly, to use a SharePoint list as a data source. You would want to use a SharePoint list as a lookup or a drop-down field. The reasons for doing this is a business user can manage and create these data sets that are used as lookup. You can reuse the master data across your organization. So if you already have lists that are configured within SharePoint, you can use these within a process. It's easier to set up and manage these lists from SharePoint. I will show us an example. If we go back into SharePoint itself, you'll see I have a lists library down the left. If I click lookup, you'll see we have the list is termed lookup, and within it we have maintenance, IT, cleaning, finance, and I've just linked it to a procurement type of general. For those of you who saw the previous step that I did within the XM workspace, those should look familiar. If I open up a purchase requisition, you'll see we have a category. That SharePoint list we're looking at is driving the contents of that drop-down. If I go in and we add a new item, let's call this spares, and I'm going to link it to general, and we're going to save. So now I've got maintenance, IT, cleaning, finance, and spares. If I go back to the XMPro screen, we have spares down the bottom. If I do the same from within SharePoint, so once again I'm just going to the portal page within SharePoint, I've got an open XMPro for SharePoint down the bottom. The two web parts, right across the top I have a process list. If I scroll down, I can create a new purchase requisition. If I have a look at the category, we have maintenance, cleaning, IT, spares, and finance come through there as well. So one definition for this process surfaced in multiple interfaces. If I go back into SharePoint and I actually delete that spares, so I'm going to delete that list. I'm going to go back up to the main portal. Once again, process list, scroll down to the actual requisition itself, maintenance, cleaning, IT, and finance. So very quickly I can configure and manage my data lists within SharePoint, which is easy and simple for a business user to do. If you already have lists created, you can reuse those lists as well. It's easier to set up once again. You can also apply security to these lists from within SharePoint itself. So if I'm querying Let's just go back to the top. And we go back to our list. I have a specific procurement type that I was linking this to. You can set up various access and security within SharePoint so that specific individuals do not have access to specific procurement types or requisition types. I've got a very simple example here. You may have your cost centers stored and maintained within SharePoint. If user is not allowed a specific cost center, you would set that security up in SharePoint, and we would enforce that security within XMPro as well, so that information is not surfaced where access is not given for it. So using SharePoint List as a data source, why? It's a lot easier to manage and create data sets from a business user's perspective in SharePoint and have that surfaced in an XMPro form as a lookup or a drop-down field. You're going to reuse your existing data sets, so there's no need to go into SQL, create a table, copy that information into it, and then have the whole management and maintenance on that as well. The lists within SharePoint are versioned, so you can have a look at who deleted what versus who added what. So there is auditability on the list in there, which is built in as part of the SharePoint list itself. So just to wrap up what we've gone through, I'm going to start at the back and work my way forward. So using a SharePoint list as a data source. So we linked that into an actual process. We used it as a drop-down, and we used it as a category filter for a procurement request. Uploading a document into a SharePoint document library. You can keep it simple and put it into a global SharePoint document library, or you can be very specific and upload it into specific designated SharePoint libraries. Hand in hand with this, you've got your SharePoint versioning of documents. You've got your metadata which goes with it, and you've got the proper indexing and retrieval through the SharePoint search capabilities for this document. The document is linked in the case file function, so you can have a look at that from a process perspective versus having to go into the SharePoint document library, find the document, and pull that information out there as well. And then where we started, intelligent processes within SharePoint. XMPro brings iBPMS to SharePoint. Within that, we had a look at standard web parts. We had a very simple SharePoint web part page. We had tasks and lists on the left, and we had the form on the right. The task list, the same task list is available in all the XMPro interfaces. So you deploy it once, see it in multiple interfaces. We had a look at it in the web interface, and then we switched over to the SharePoint interface. The process form, how does the form render in SharePoint? How does this form render within a standard XMPro web frontend as well? And it's the exact same form rendering in Outlook if that's your chosen interface to your end users. Then we had a look at how to configure firstly web parts. The web parts exactly the same as you would configure any SharePoint web part. You can edit the web parts. You've got your SharePoint functionality. We've extended that with XMPro specific information around lists, columns, where's it getting its information, colors, that kind of information on a web part. Then what we had a look at is what intelligence which is not found in SharePoint. The first one we looked at was a process goal. A KPI defined at a process level which provides more information to the user who needs to make a decision. The second one we looked at was a social process discussion, once again at transaction level, and secondly at a process level, process improvement level. The ability to start that from within the process itself as well as the audit history surfacing the task, process, discussion, as well as responses to the discussion as well. So it's all part of the audit history. So for the first time we can add and link social process discussions to a process transaction and actually have an audit trail that represents that. The third one was the next best action. Predictive analytics, looking at the history of that actual process. Where's the history of that going, and predicting where the next logical step for the routing would be. Once again, it's not going to make the decision for you. It's just providing you more context information so that you can better make the decisions you need to make with that process. And the last one is the case files themselves. We've uploaded a document to SharePoint. We've uploaded a second document and a third step and a fourth step. If you wish to view these documents without the case file feature, you would need to go into SharePoint, find the specific document library, and pull that information out. So what we did with the case file is we've given you the functionality from within the process itself to click the case file, open up, and that'll return you a list of all documents which have been uploaded, irrespective of their document repository, whether it's SharePoint, whether it's a file system, whether it's another document management system at the back. It's all in one central place. You can access it from within the process and make your decisions from there. Thank you for attending today. If there are any questions or any feedback, please send them through. We'll send replies as soon as we get those. And thank you. Have a great day.